Good morning. Welcome to today's story, a touching, humane, and educational tale.
At just 26 years old, Hazel Monroe was completely stripped of her life. In a matter of minutes, she was entirely disowned by her wealthy family, her bank accounts frozen, her name coldly erased from the family trust, cast out into the freezing rain with nothing but a frayed backpack and exactly $43 to her name. She was left absolutely alone, with nowhere to go. But instead of begging for their forgiveness, Hazel did the unthinkable. With just $10, she went to the county office and purchased the deed to the only piece of land her family had deliberately abandoned, a crumbling, forgotten stone bridge spanning a treacherous, fog-filled ravine. Her relatives scoffed at the news. The locals whispered that the Monroe girl had finally lost her mind, choosing to freeze in the wilderness next to a decaying, dangerous structure that no one had set foot on in 40 years. To everyone else, she had just spent her last dimes on a worthless pile of rocks and rusted cables. But what they didn't know was that this rotting bridge wasn't just a forgotten ruin. Hidden deep within its central stone pillar, sealed away from the world, lay a 40-year-old secret. A secret her family had spent generations trying to keep her from finding. What Hazel was about to uncover beneath the moss and broken timber wouldn't just expose a dark, twisted legacy. What she built from those ruins was about to change her destiny and her fortune forever. Before we cross this bridge and uncover the truth together, if stories of survival, unearthing hidden mysteries, and rebuilding a shattered life mean something to you, please hit that subscribe button and take a moment to let us know in the comments below. Where in the world are you watching this story from today? The expulsion wasn't a heated family argument. It was cold, procedural, and terrifyingly fast. Sitting in the mahogany-paneled office of the family lawyer, Hazel watched as her entire life was dismantled in minutes. There was no shouting, just the quiet shuffling of papers. Her older brother wouldn't even look her in the eye. As she sat there, she realized her bank cards had already been deactivated. But it was a small detail that caught her attention. The old family heirloom maps and estate records that normally sat on the shelf were gone, hidden away. The speed of it all made one thing chillingly clear. She wasn't just unwanted, she was an inconvenience. They were removing her before she could ask the wrong questions. Instead of begging to be let back into a house built on lies, Hazel made her choice. She packed a single bag, walked out the iron gates, and disappeared into the fog on her own terms. But walking away with pride didn't prepare her for the brutal reality of the wilderness. As the paved road turned to dirt, and the dirt dissolved into a tangled forest trail, the temperature began to plummet. Her phone lost its signal. The biting cold seeped through her thin jacket. Just as the sun began to set, casting long, haunting shadows through the trees, she saw it. Looming over a deep, rushing ravine was a massive stone bridge. It was archaic, its surface cracked and half swallowed by thick vines and crawling moss. It looked like a relic from a forgotten century. Hazel stood frozen. She knew every inch of her family's land records. Yet this colossal structure had never once been mentioned in their stories. It had been entirely erased. With night falling rapidly, the bridge became her only option for survival. Underneath one of the remaining stable stone arches, Hazel faced her first real trial. It was not a romantic escape. It was agonizing. With bare, shivering hands, she dragged heavy, rotting planks to build a crude windbreak. The rough stones scraped her palms to bleeding. That first night, the wind howled through the ravine like a mourning ghost. Hazel lay there, freezing, hungry, and unable to sleep. But as she stared up at the massive stone blocks protecting her from the storm, a single, piercing question kept her awake. Why was this fortress-like structure wiped from their history? And what were they so terrified she might find here? When morning finally broke, the harsh daylight revealed the true scale of the ruins. Hazel knew that to survive another freezing night, she couldn't just huddle in the dirt. She had to rebuild. She started small. She cleared debris, separated rotted timber from solid oak, and studied the load-bearing stones of the main arch. It was grueling, agonizing work. But as she cleared the dirt around the central support pillar, her bleeding hands brushed against something that made her stop cold. The stonework here didn't match the rest of the bridge. It was too deliberate. The mortar too precise for a random patch job. Using a rusted iron spike she found nearby, She pried away a loose stone. Behind it lay a dry, concealed cavity. Inside, wrapped in heavy oilcloth, was a weathered leather journal and a stack of yellowed letters. Reading them by the fading afternoon light, the first layer of a chilling truth emerged. The names in the letters weren't strangers. They were her ancestors, an aunt, a great-uncle, names that had been carefully erased from the official family tree. And just like Hazel, they had all been cast out, labeled as unstable or unworthy. They had all been driven to this exact bridge. It wasn't just a ruin. It was a test, and a dead drop for a truth someone wanted buried. The journal hinted that a massive fortune had been methodically stolen from their side of the family, diverted through falsified deeds over decades. But uncovering the past came at a brutal physical cost. That night, a violent rainstorm tore through the ravine. As Hazel scrambled in the dark to protect the journal, a weakened section of the arch above her gave way. Heavy stones crashed down, missing her by inches. Exhausted, soaked to the bone, and bleeding from a deep gash on her arm, Hazel hit her absolute lowest point. The voices of her family echoed in her head, telling her she was weak. But looking at the fractured stones, a quiet, fierce defiance ignited within her. Instead of running, she studied the collapse. She learned the stress lines. She rebuilt the wall, this time stronger, interlocking the stones with a deliberate purpose. She was no longer just surviving. She was mastering the bridge. But her hard-won triumph was short-lived. The next morning, while gathering firewood near the edge of the ravine, Hazel found something that made her blood run cold. It wasn't an old relic. It was a fresh, deep boot print in the mud, and hanging from a nearby branch was a modern, metal lantern hook. The journals belonged to the dead, but someone very much alive was still guarding this secret, and they knew she was here. That fresh boot print should have terrified her. It should have sent her running back to the city, defeated and begging for scraps. But something inside Hazel had irrevocably shifted. The fear that had paralyzed her on the first night was gone, replaced by a cold, sharpened focus. She wasn't leaving. She began to rebuild with absolute intention. She reinforced the fractured arch with heavy timber, stabilized the foundation stones, and engineered a clever system using rusted tin to collect and filter rainwater. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was fortifying. Every stone she lifted, every knot she tied, was a direct defiance of the lie her family had told her entire life, that she was weak, dependent, and unworthy. This forgotten bridge, once broken and discarded, was mirroring her own reclamation. As she dug deeper into the bridge's architecture to secure her shelter, she uncovered another hidden crevice, this one tucked behind a false backing in the stonework. Inside was something far more recent than the old journals. It was a letter, penned in a frantic, shaking hand. Hazel recognized the handwriting instantly. It belonged to her late grandmother. The letter revealed the devastating, personal truth her grandmother had known. She had pieced together the stolen inheritance and the erased bloodlines. But before she could expose the family's dark syndicate, she was silenced, declared mentally unfit, and locked away in a private facility until her death. The message ended with a plea. They will come for you too. The final proof is in the foundation. The bridge isn't just a hiding place. It's a vault. Hazel looked up at the massive central load path of the structure. The archaic symbols in the older journals suddenly made sense. They were architectural blueprints. The final truth wasn't buried in the dirt. It was engineered directly into the keystone of the bridge itself. She realized she was no longer just searching for a stolen fortune. She was standing on the verge of reclaiming her family's true continuity and finishing the war her grandmother had started. With the fading light of dusk casting long, golden shadows across the ravine, Hazel stood before the bridge's massive central keystone. Her grandmother's letter had given her the map. Using a heavy iron pry bar she had salvaged from the ruins, she wedged it into a nearly invisible seam in the archaic stonework. With a deafening grind of rock against rock, the heavy block finally slid forward, revealing a deep, lead-lined vault. Inside, she didn't just find forgotten wealth. She found the absolute, undeniable truth. Wrapped in preserving wax were stacks of original land deeds spanning thousands of acres, pristine bearer bonds untouched for decades, and meticulous ledger pages documenting every fraudulent transfer her current family had made. They hadn't just hidden money, they had built their entire elite status by methodically erasing the rightful bloodline, her bloodline. She wasn't thrown out because she was a liability. She was exiled because she was getting too close to realizing she was the true, undisputed heir. But beneath the cold legal documents lay something far more valuable. It was a final, sealed testament written by her great-grandfather, the architect of the bridge. The ink was faded, but the words pierced straight through her years of agonizing loneliness. To the one who finds this, forgive me. I built this sanctuary for the day they would cast you out. You were never broken, my child. You were simply too strong for them to control. Tears, warm and heavy, finally broke through Hazel's hardened exterior. As she stood up, the evening wind blowing through the newly reinforced arches of her bridge, she realized something profound. The multi-million-dollar fortune in her hands mattered, yes, but the real inheritance wasn't the vault. It was the bridge itself. It had given her shelter when she had nothing, tested her spirit, and ultimately handed her back her identity. Looking out over the sprawling valley that was now legally hers, Hazel Monroe was no longer the frightened girl who had been thrown away. She was the first person in generations to hold both the truth and the power to protect it. She was the guardian of a recovered legacy. And tomorrow, she wasn't going back to beg for her place. She was going back to take it all.